Our next speaker is Dr. Philip Sayo. Philip's Associate Professor in the Division of Rheumatology at Johns Hopkins. He's Director of the Johns Hopkins Vasculitis Center, and he's also Director of the Fellowship Program. He received his medical degree at Columbia, internship and residency and fellowship at Hopkins. He told me the other night he went to Baltimore for a short period of time, and it didn't work out that way. He's had a number of awards for teaching. He's editor of the Oxford American Handbook of Rheumatology. He's going to give us an update on ANCA-associated vasculitis. Philip.
So I've been sitting with all of you here in the front row to avoid taking a seat from a paying audience member. And I've had two thoughts sort of rolling around in my head. The first was, I kind of wish I wasn't speaking today. And it's not that I don't want to be here, because for those of you who've been following the news and what's going on in Baltimore, you know I want to be in Florida right now, right? But you've heard from some power speakers today, and I felt like if I went up after them, I was going to sound like that tone-deaf girl on American Idol who's singing at the top of her lungs and is upset that no one sees what a genius she is. So I'm not sure, but we'll see how I do in the comparison. My second thought is I'm a little bit upset with myself because I feel like I lost out on the chance to do a great sociologic experiment. So I wish what I did when I first came in this morning was I took a picture of all the speakers, and then I gave you a copy of them and told you to take it home to your friends and family. Because I would bet if you showed it to anyone back home and you asked them who was the first American speaker that you heard from today, they wouldn't be picking me. So I was thinking that if all of you are listening carefully to my accent to try to figure out what part of the British Empire I'm from, the answer is Long Island. So I'm a New Yorker by birth, but I've lived in Baltimore for many years, and I've worked for Hopkins basically for the last, 15 plus years, which, believe it or not, is a drop in the bucket compared to many people who work at Hopkins. But I always tell people that working at Hopkins comes as a little bit of a burden. And it's not because of the race riots, and it's not because of what Hopkins calls my salary. It's because it's hard to work at a place like Hopkins without sort of thinking about all the greats that have come before you, and it does weigh on you a little bit. So this is an example. This is a painting by John Singer Sargent that actually hangs in our library, and this is called The Four Professors, and it represents the four founders of Johns Hopkins Hospital back in the 1800s. So over on your left is Kelly, who founded the field of gynecologic surgery and gynecologic oncology in the United States. Over on the other side is William Henry Welch. He is famous for discovering Clostridium perfringens as the cause of gas gangrene, and then went on to train many educators and clinicians in medicine, including a name that I think might be familiar to some of you, Walter Reed. The person in the back, standing in the shadows, appropriately, that's Halsted. Now, he's famous for having popularized some fad technique that was coming into vogue at the time called washing your hands before surgery. He also worked on techniques of both breast surgery and gastrointestinal surgery, which continue to be used today. And finally, up in the front is the eminence grise. He is William Osler. He is the person who decided to take medical students to the bedside, and he was the person who introduced the system of rounding that we still use in medical education today. So you can see when I'm putting together a talk like this, there are a lot of people I can sort of think about as I'm trying to put together my slides and think about what I want to say. But instead, what I decided to do was rely on another philosopher who really impacted my development, especially really early on in my career. So for those of you who are not laughing, it's because you're younger than me and you just have to be quiet right now. For those of you who are laughing, it's because you recognize the photo as a photo of Matthew Broderick, who was in an iconic movie called Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is a movie about a young man who takes a day off from school and has the best day ever. And for those of you who haven't watched it, I highly recommend it, because there was some point in my life where I could recite almost every single sentence from this movie by heart. Now, there is one phrase that sort of stuck with me over the years, and it's this. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't look around once in a while, you may miss it. And it's because I think that if you look at rheumatology now, you would think we were cardiologists. I mean, who knew that our field would be a field where you'd have to memorize acronym after